se pierde.
Regional government.
It's the one in the middle.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I was confused because someone was like, when it's you can spin it like a
Claro.
Is it
That
still okay?
includes
Because
the city, but
is it still okay the mic?
bigger.
Because I tried to
Exacto.
remove my phone
Pues
and
lo tenemos que sacar adelante. No se puede ir a otro sitio, tiene que estar ahí.
Hello, everybody. No, not yet. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spanish Pavilion at COP28. We're delighted to be here, and we're about to get kicked off with a great panel behind me on an issue that really runs through everything we do, and that is water. How do we make sure there's not too much of it? How do we make sure there's not too little of it? It is one of the biggest challenges facing us here at COP and outside of COP too. And we're going to listen during this panel to ways in which our panel here are handling this huge challenge, the kind of priorities that they are deciding on in terms of investment and political action. And I'm going to go to you in a moment. But before we do, I want to invite the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, Ambroise Fayol, who leads for the bank, the EU Climate Bank, on environment, climate and development. Over to you, Ambroise.
Thank you so much, Shirin, and good afternoon to all of you. I will be very brief because I think what you are all waiting for is to listen from our panel. Let me start by what one of our biggest clients let me start first by thanking Spain for hosting this event, and it is so timely and so important. And I would like to start by saying something that I heard yesterday in a bilateral meeting with one of our biggest clients in Spain, who told me water is to climate what teeth are to sharks. Without them, you cannot do anything. Without water, there is no need to be very much worried about climate change, because there will be nothing to do about the catastrophe that is ahead of us on climate change. So the main message that I think I would like to convey today is water has to be, and water management has to be, a significant part of our climate policy and climate adaptation. You see water scarcity everywhere. You see then water flooding the next day. So water management has become really something that is extremely important. We finance projects around 3 billion euro a year on water in Europe, outside Europe, in cities, in rural areas, related to health problems that are more and more linked to climate, actually, related to biodiversity, that is also very much an issue that is linked to water. So you see more and more water being part of our climate action, and I'm very pleased for that. It fits very well with our Climate Bank roadmap. We at the EU Bank for Climate, we have developed a policy that is targeting more volume on climate and more substance in terms of Paris alignment of the financing that we do, and water fits into this strategy very well. So I will give the floor immediately to the panel. I think it's really, as I said, timely, and I hope that it will bring a few ideas that we will take back for the future financing on water inside and outside Europe for EIB. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President, for kicking us off and getting us into the mood. As you've said, this is a hugely important, pressing and intense challenge which affects many of the citizens of the world. Spain, in whose pavilion we are sitting, experienced last summer extraordinary temperatures and felt that very close to home. But of course, other continents, Chile, from which one of our panelists is from as well, and of course the region that we're meeting in today, this week as well. Let me introduce the panelists first of all before we get into it. Jeanette Coombs-Lanotte from Danone, we're really happy to have you. I think you're the sustainability lead at Danone, so we're going to hear in a moment what this means in practice for your company and what steps you're taking to meet that challenge. Very happy to have my own colleague, Frank Jesus, who is from the EIB. Frank is a water specialist at the EIB and advises people like the Vice President on water, on projects, on what we need to focus our investments on. Also very happy to have next to me Mauricio Fabri, who's come all the way from Chile, from the regional government of Santiago, where you're leading on these issues. So yes. Great to have you with us. Robert Breers, you are a writer. You've written extensively on the subject of water, of resilience, and also financing water. You're also the founder of Financing Water Security and Green Growth and various other things. So good. You're going to help us contextualize a little bit, I think. Blanca Solana Garcia, thank you very much for joining us from Saragosa City Council, where I think you're the Director General for EU funds. Yes. Have I got that right? Okay. And last but absolutely not least is Federico Ramos de Armos. Again, really happy to have colleagues from the private sector here. You're from Velio Agua, and I think you run the Madrid part of that. So great to see you. Robert, maybe I can start with you and ask you to help contextualize really a little bit. We're going to structure our conversation into three parts. So we're going to start by trying to understand the scale of the challenge and what is at stake. Then we're going to look at the kind of actions that you are all taking in your various spaces. And then we're going to ask what is needed to actually help you overcome the challenges, maybe from this COP, maybe from the regulators. That's up to you. You can give us your perspectives. Robert, what's at stake here? Give us a sense of that.
Well, I think in water security, there's two parts to the coin. First of all, you have the climate challenges that we're experiencing, but also non-climatic challenges as well. So we have climate change bringing extreme weather events. Now, of course, droughts, but also during floods, you can also have water conservation mandates because the wastewater treatment plants are disrupted. So, and at the same time, we have, population growth, economic growth, rising, conflicts around the world, also impacting water security. A critical part of water security is that both humans and nature have an equal right to water. So while humans may be struggling to get water supply, we can't take away from nature because that would destroy the ecosystem services that give us the water in the first place. So unfortunately, humans and nature have to somehow coexist. But this is a challenge because climate change, as well as economic growth, industrialization, water, energy, food nexus challenges, and all these other mega challenges that are impacting our water supply, both quality and quantity as well.
And I guess that's why, in this context, the efficient, active management of our water resources has to be part of the adaptation action that we're talking a lot about here at COP28.
Yes, and what I mainly speak about is demand management. You can't just keep taking water. We have to find a way to conserve and also use it efficiently in industry and commercial. Everything we do, we need to more drop per crop for food and everything like that.
Thanks, Robert. Maybe I can turn to you, Jeanette. What are you doing at Danone in terms of actually, first of all, before we hear about the actions you're taking, just to kind of assess the risk, because that's the first stage, isn't it, in terms of your own processes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So, well, first of all, Danone is a global food and beverage company with dairy, plant-based waters, and also specialized nutrition. All of our business is, like many, completely dependent on water. So we have, for many years now, been conducting a country-level risk assessment. It's a campaign we lead on a regular basis. We have our country business units use a risk assessment that was developed by WWF. We also have our internal processes, and that's to give us a global picture. Then where, and unfortunately that's becoming more and more frequent, where we see that there are particular risks, we run additional assessments. So for example, in the north of Africa, where we're quite present, we're now running an additional kind of risk assessment, because what we see and what other external research confirms is that there's a drop in productivity of linked to dairy as a direct result of the water scarcity that's growing there.
So there's a huge amount at stake for you.
Our entire business is at stake.
Yeah, that's really stark.
Both in terms, maybe I can just say a word about that, both in terms of keeping your social license to operate, and there, you know, it's really about, we have a waters business with production sites that's long-standing, and we invest a lot in maintaining and supporting watershed preservation, but even if in reality, most of our water footprint is in agriculture. 90% of it is in agriculture. So it's not really as much linked to this business. We are a symbol, and we know we're a symbol, so we worry a lot about if there is growing water scarcity, even if we're 0.01% of the water use in a given region, which is often the case, we know that there is at stake our social license to operate. And then on the other side, I mentioned that we are seeing a drop in production, and so there's at stake on the other side is just business continuity. So
Absolutely.
Our entire business is at stake.
Yeah, that's very important, I think, to make that distinction of the two different kinds of risks, in a sense, for you, both the continuation of the business, but also the responsibility to use water responsibly as a company. Frank, maybe take us to what the financial institutions can do. Water efficiency is not necessarily an easy thing to finance, is it?
Yes and no. I mean, and it's not just about water efficiency, because climate change, water, we have also the flooding problem. But when we work as a bank on the water sector, it's through loans, program loans, other instruments, financial instruments, but we work as a bank, and we tend to work with public sector, municipalities, government, or private entities that are given the license to develop water infrastructure by the public sector. And often in these cases, the decisions are not just made on the technical economic basis, but policies and policy issues come into play, or social issues come into play. If I give an example, in Spain over the last 2 decades, other issues more important to the government came into play, like the financial crisis, competition with other investments, and investment in water infrastructure dropped tremendously, and it's today 56% below the other EU regions. And besides, when we speak about investment in adaptation, this is often seen as a cost, an immediate cost, and even if you do the investment, the benefit people will not see because it's avoiding the consequences of climate change.
Yes.
Okay? While if you do the investment, it will bring economic benefit because you won't have the economic consequences of climate change, but this is not often factored in the decisions. And in the end, sadly, many entities are convinced to do something about adaptation water when they face the impact of climate change directly.
Yes.
For instance, after a number of situations of water scarcity and droughts in Italy, we've seen Italian entities, municipalities, coming to us to help them invest in water efficiency and water conservation purposes.
Yes.
And what we see, for instance, after a number of droughts in the EU, that this topic is coming back to the forefront in terms of need for investment.
Exactly, and it will inevitably be a case of political priority as well, which is one of the big issues, I guess. Federico, we're lucky to have you here as a water operator. I mean, I guess there are so many ways in which you can tackle this issue. I mean, there's water distribution systems, modernizing, digitizing water networks, reducing leaks, irrigation techniques, water-saving practices in households and industries. What do you think is the most important, and what's the most challenging and yet the most important of these?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your invitation. Veolia in Spain works in 12 big cities and almost 1,000 medium and small municipalities. So we have 13 million clients talking about homes and industries, irrigation. So we know quite well how is water in Spain. And if I want to share with you some numbers. UN forecast for 2060 is that in Spain we will have a decrease of 17% of water by 2060. And by 2016, 73% of the country will be in its way to desertification. So this means that this scenario is a high-risk scenario for us, especially for a company which operates in the water area and for municipalities. So, first challenge, well, water security. How to enhance water security? What can we do to have a better water security for our population? But also, other things, and we can talk about other questions, is how to adapt our legal framework to this situation, to the stress that we are going to live in water, how to guarantee the economical sustainability of all the system, decoupling tariffs from political decisions is not, doesn't make sense. It's a bit ancient, a bit old. So, well, many things to do.
I'm feeling like if we shut ourselves up in a room for a week or so, we might get to some actually great solutions here. Perhaps we should think about that when we finish the panel. But we have two policymakers here at a local level, Blanca and Mauricio. Blanca, maybe I can ask you first of all, the fact of these extreme weather events, these are happening more and more frequently. How do you, though, integrate that into your planning and your policy making, given that you can't predict them?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and on behalf of my city, Saragosa, thank you very much. I would like to share my experience, like in my first weeks as a consigliere in Saragosa, because when I preparing to be a consigliere, a politician in your city, you think, in my case, in public budget, finance, European funds, but I never thought that the big experience that I did live as a politician in my city, it would be a storm. A torrential storm that happened. A storm right. That happened in July, the first week, and everybody knows our city around the world will impact torrential rain around the city. And what's very important this decision, because the climate challenges is not the latest for the cities, is one of the best actions in your city. And this experience changed a lot of things, because we discovered strength and weakness. One of the strengths was the importance of emergency and civil protection for the city. And in 6 minutes, all the policies, firefighters, protection action was in the city, in the area where the flood, and nobody died in this extremely situation. But we discovered some strength like torrential tanks that avoid the storm was better in the city, and we discovered some weakness. We need more information about the climate change and challenges, and in our case, the National Meteorology Agency informed us about the extremely storm in the region, Aragon, and in the capital, but nobody detect that so many rain drop in a concrete and a specific area of the city, and it was the problem. So we need share information, and we discovered new risks in our maps of the city.
And that maybe is something we could come back to, the role also of digital technology, early warning systems, things I think we're looking at the European Investment Bank as well, in terms of part of the adaptation work that the institution's doing. But Maurizio, maybe give us your perspective from Chile. How are you handling these extreme weather events and integrating them into your policy and planning work?
Well, many thanks. I like what you said, Sharon, because how we put these events has a part of the equation. I think that is really interesting question. What happened in Chile, and I'm sure it's happening everywhere in the world, is that we used to have a lot of water. We have the Andes mountain range that accumulates a lot of snow.
Yes.
We have a winter. Maybe in 200 years, we have 3 droughts, once every 30 years or something. Now we have 13 years of drought, 13. And this year, it rained like a normal year, but the snow didn't accumulate at 2,000 meters above the sea level. It gets to 4,000. So all the water came down with a lot of turbidity. So even though we have a normal rain, we didn't could use the water to produce water for the people. And we were in a hurry. So we are making different, we are really getting into action. What it means? It means governance with the private sector, with the academia to have the data, with the state, with the local agencies, social communities, to promote a new governance for water in Santiago. And then projects. So we are infiltrating the aquifer, so when we have this kind of rain, we can accumulate in the aquifer. We have a lot of mountains, so we are doing some old ancient structures by the name of amunas would penetrate the water into the aquifer. And we are really pushing the efficiency.
Yep.
Our plants, our irrigation system lose almost 30% of the water. It's a lot of water, so we're really pushing into the efficiency in the private sector, in the state, and the central government.
Thank you. In a moment, we'll look a bit more at the issue of how you educate. Maybe that's not quite the right word, but at least incentivize and encourage efficiency also among citizens, among communities, and what you can do. Maybe before that we do that, though, we can just have a look at a video which Saragosa Council has prepared, which can give us a bit of a perspective on the kind of actions they're taking.
Have you ever wondered what a city that harmonizes history with a vision for the future looks like? Welcome to Zaragoza, Spain's 4th largest city. Steeped in history that dates back to Roman times, Zaragoza is a city where the majesty of the Basilica del Pilar meets the vibrant pulse of modern life. As you stroll along the banks of the Ebro River, you'll experience a city that's not just a cultural crossroads, but a beacon of European charm and hospitality. But there's more to Zaragoza than meets the eye. We're at the forefront of an exciting journey towards a sustainable future, as a proud participant in the EU's mission for climate neutral and smart cities by 2030. Among only 10 cities in Europe, Zaragoza shines as a leader in reinventing urban living for the betterment of its people and our planet. Our ambitious climate strategy is built on 5 solid pillars. Embracing smart city projects, pioneering sustainable and intelligent mobility solutions, harnessing the power of renewable energy and efficiency for our communities, integrating water management and nature-based solutions, and advancing a circular economy for a sustainable future. These efforts aren't just about making a city, they're about creating a home where life flourishes, jobs are created, and resilience against climate change is strengthened. Imagine a city where every step forward in sustainability means a leap towards a better quality of life, a thriving economy, and a vibrant destination for visitors from around the world. This is Zaragoza, a city where every street corner, every smiling face, and every green initiative is a testament to what we can achieve together. Join us in this journey and be a part of Zaragoza's story, a story of innovation, resilience, and a brighter, sustainable future.
Thank you very much for sharing that video with us, Blanca. Before I ask you a little bit more about what the council is doing, maybe I can turn back to Robert. I mean, there is obviously the aspect of public acceptance, working with the community is hugely important. How can, do you see any particular good practices out there which are managing to kind of get that message across and raise public awareness when it comes to water efficiency and management of resources?
Yeah, I think some of the cities around the world have really stepped forward in demand management. So you have like Denver, which in Colorado, it learnt its lesson really badly, but then it preempted scarcity in the future, and it went for obviously pricing reforms, went to smart meters, went to alternative water supplies, but also public awareness and education, you know, with school children, workshops, hosting, going to a sporting event and having the water utility coming along, giving away, you know, free water. And, you know, Hamburg has water fountains. It's about also, you can price water, you can put a smart meter in, but you could also just have a longer shower. So what's the point? The point is that you've got to educate the future generation that it becomes normal to conserve water. So obviously Singapore, places like that are very advanced in educating young people. Copenhagen is very advanced in this. You know, some may think it's propaganda, but you're encouraging the future generation to understand the scarcity of the water itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeanette, of course, from your perspective as a company, it is also about working with your stakeholders, working not just within the company, but also across the supply chain, maybe with the suppliers. Tell us a bit about what Danone is doing in that respect.
Absolutely. So there are kind of different levels of action. I think the first is in some ways the easiest, which is in our operation sites, we're really seeking excellence and trying to reduce the water we use. We have a 4R approach with reduction, reuse, recycle, reclaim. And you can save, you know, in some of our factories, we've saved 50% on water use. And there are some regulatory barriers in some geographies, by the way, to reusing the water, but it seems to be moving in the right direction. 50%
is 50%, very big.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, where does that date from? I mean, what's that?
This is quite a recent example. It was, it's from a factory in Belgium, and they put in place a reclaim program with this kind of full program, and in before and after is 50% reduction. So quite a big, but as I said, I mean, most of our water footprint is elsewhere. So I think there's operational excellence that's really important. Then there's another level, which is the watersheds where we operate and around our production sites in particular, because we have this waters business where we know the value, we have to protect the water resource. We have a long history of putting into place really multi-stakeholder action programs with governments, with communities, and that started actually in France. The model started in France because of Evian, but we've taken it in other geographies, and so we've worked with the community in Indonesia to put in place a full program that's helped to reduce unlicensed community drilling, that helped promote nature-based solutions, etc. It's still lots of opportunity to go further. But then as I mentioned, the kind of toughest one is the agriculture side. You know, again, 90% of our water footprint, and so we you might have heard about regenerative agriculture, which is the vision that many companies now are kind of moving behind, and that's an agriculture that it's outcomes based, and the goal is really to strengthen soil health, protect water and reduce water usage, strengthen biodiversity and climate mitigation adaptation. And we have regenerative agriculture programs with the water focus in 7 different countries. And we see that we can go, you know, in some circumstances we have a project in Mexico, we were able to reduce by over 40% the water use for strawberries. And then in the north of Africa, where we have quite a big business, we're also looking there. We have a program with smallholders. We source from tens of thousands of smallholders in the region, and that is both allowing us to act on the climate side, on the farmer resilience and profitability side, and on the water side. So we're putting in place both actions to, the biggest lever, frankly, is productivity, and that's a win-win because the farmers are making more money, they need fewer cows, and so you have a reduction of water use. But we also have issues linked to heat stress for cows, linked to the water that's used for crops. So we're transitioning in crops for animal feed from very water-intensive crops in the region, like maize, to things like sorghum. And so it's a process. There is potential, but huge opportunity. And maybe just one more thing I'll add to that is that in big companies like Danone, we're very used to kind of these quite structured campaigns. In some ways, pressure campaigns, but I would say in a constructive sense, where you have a very similar ask or requests from stakeholders, whether it be investors, NGOs, governments, and there's an alignment of that. And you see that on biodiversity, you see it on human rights, you see it on climate, you see it on other topics. You don't necessarily see it on water in the same way because it's been such a local issue. Yeah. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting is that could be starting to shift with the discussion on nature and the new frameworks that are coming out. But there is really a disconnect, and I work a lot with stakeholders on the other topics. There is really a disconnect between the urgency of the problem and, frankly, and I say this, constructive pressure that companies receive at global level, because we might feel at local level, but at global level, it's yes. we don't really get campaigns, we don't really get investor, So somehow, in a constructive way, that could be helpful.
So you're quite like the NGOs listening to start pressuring a little bit more. Okay,
right, and we can work together on what is the ask that all companies, what do all companies need to do?
No,
what's the equivalent to 1.5 degree pathway and
yeah. Thanks for that. Really interesting. Frank, maybe I can ask you then, maybe picking up from that a little bit. How does that we on the panel in the room probably have worked out that this is urgent. To what extent has that permeated the consciousness of a bank like the EIB, other financial institutions? How are these IFIs? You obviously work for the EIB, but you have a pretty good sense of what others are doing. To what extent is this now really more central in decisions on investments in climate resilient infrastructure, water efficiency, that kind of thing?
Okay, yeah, very much so, I would say. And if I take a step back first for the EIB, and maybe many of you have heard we call the climate bank, the EU climate bank, and there's a reason for that. Back in 2019, we decided that all our operations would be Paris aligned. And so when you hear Paris aligned, you're thinking mitigation, but it's also for resilience, meaning that all our operations need to be resilient to the impact of climate change, with the information that we have today, of course, because there's some unknown there. But what happens when we see an operation coming to us for lending, equity funding, et cetera, is very early on we're looking at, is the operation what they're suggesting we fund resilient to climate change or not. So we call that, we have a tool called the CRA, the Climate Resilience Assessment, and we do that for the operation. But doing this, we engage with the promoters or the clients about what they do or what they could do better to improve their situation. So that applies to any project, be it in the EU or outside the EU. And to paraphrase what Ambroise was saying earlier, for us, water is to climate what water is to adaptation, what energy is to mitigation. So very important. Almost half of the investment we do in adaptation in the bank is in the water sector. Just to give you a sense, okay? And not only do we work on a project, but also we look at the strategies of the promoters that come to us. If they have a good strategy to, not just on the product, but as a whole, be resilient to climate change, it's fine. If they don't have, then we tell them, you need to do something about this, and we can help them. And through this, we help bring a bit the consciousness and the practical implementation of resilience actions more to the forefront, increase them. And we do that through a number of operations, or a number of financial tools, etc. And we do that on classical water infrastructure, efficiency, flood control, but also we're interested in more innovative technologies using circular economy principles to reuse wastewater, for instance, digitalization of water management, nature-based solutions, etc., etc. So there's a whole range of things we do, and if you look outside the bank in the EU, with the taxonomy coming into play and the required reporting that will come to corporate or banks, there are a number of activities, a lot of activities in the water sector that are under this taxonomy, and so transparency about what corporates and banks are doing in the EU will become way more important than what it is today, and I hope and I think this will push a bit more for action in this domain.
Thank you very much, Frank, for that. And a very important point, I think, that mainstreaming that consideration into all the projects, not just the water projects, is a hugely important thing to do. Maybe, Federico, I can ask you, you yourself personally have experience, I think, in regional government and now also in the water company. So I guess you're well placed to perhaps reflect on the question, what do the water companies need in terms of action from government? How are they interacting, in your experience, in Spain, in Madrid, in terms of pushing forward this priority?
Well, as in many other countries in Spain, we have 3 different levels of public administration. We work hand in hand with municipalities, but there are also regional governments and also the central government or the central administration. So we would appreciate from the private sector a better coordination between these 3 levels. All of them, I know that are trying to do their best to improve water management, but there is sometimes a lack of coordination between these 3 steps, probably because the legal framework must be updated, and so we must review the competences of these 3 steps. This will be interesting. If we talk about the municipalities and the urban services of water, we would appreciate a national authority for these services, because we are working with many different regulators, and we would like to have a common legal framework for all, with different particular legislation for all, but with a common ground for all these municipalities. And finally, I think that in the future, energy and water will be closer and closer. This means with water you can produce energy, with energy you can produce water, but these 2 systems are working on his way now. So in the future, a holistic vision of the national energy system and the national water system will be very useful for us.
Indeed, and I think that really resonates with what Jeanette was saying, that at a certain point it has to be understood as an issue which also goes beyond the local governance sort of situation. But nevertheless, it is something for you local governments to deal with. So, I mean, Blanca, particularly going back to the kind of involvement of the community and also just what you're trying to put into place, give us a sense of what's happening in Saragosa.
It's very interesting, the question and the answer of my colleague, because in Zaragoza we have worked a lot to get a missional strategic aligned with the European programs, that mission to get the neutral climate in 2030, and it will be an inspiration for the city. We have a plan for work in adaptation, mitigation, climate change, but the European program to get the neutral climate but in 2030 is a good inspiration because join important things. Local political, of course, but strategies of national and the vision, the European objectives for to get European challenges for climate change. So we work with this inspiration and join of course, our partners. In this room, we have one partner in the city that works with his company in green energy and hydrogen. It's a good example that the city needs work with the talent in the city. Veolia is a good partner in our city for to get in water and energy, of course. We need to join all talent, public talent, private talent, society talent, of course, all investment for to change the things that we must correct and change, no, in our city. And I think this program is important. We have the level of the European Commission with 10 cities for to get the objective, and our city is a highlight and a city highlight for the rest of the cities in Spain and in Europe. And it's important because the city will be an experimentation laboratory cities. Yes. Yes. So you can prove pilots an initiative that can reply in other places and cities. And for the region, I think it's important to join the talent, public, private, and to get new objectives and new models of economics.
Yeah, I mean, to what extent do you think you've already been successful in, raising public awareness, for example, yes, as a city council?
In water, we have a new project for digital innovation in the whole cycle of the water, with work with the partner of Veolia in the future, I think. And we need to avoid that the water losses. And it's important the water from Saragosa because we have 3 rivers, and the main river was Rio Ebro and was the protagonist in the Expo in 2008. And we need that we go like example with this kind of project that innovation, digitalization in all the cycle of the water. Yes. And it's not possible to lose water in this moment in Spain.
No, exactly. The conservation is hugely important. Mauricio, do you think as the person in charge of this within the regional government, do you think that we need more of, or what are you doing in terms of the carrot and the stick? Meaning the stick being the regulation and the carrot being ways of incentivizing the public to actually do their bit to manage the water resources themselves in the households.
Yeah, it is hard because when you try to promote water efficiency in residents, in people, they say, well, the productive center expend much more water than us. Yeah. And then when you promote that in the productive sector, they say no. The agriculture people is what is expending more water. So I don't know if it's a carrot, but I'm really agree with Federico that since our institutions wasn't prepared for water scarcity, we have a huge dispersed, diverse laws and institutions that take care of the water. And in this side, we need to have a common framework and clear numbers, clear projections, and clear rules. I don't know if it will be a carrot also, maybe, but we need to measure every drop that we have of water and try to fit the demand with the offering. Because what we're seeing is that the offering that nature gives us to sweet water is getting lower, and the demand is not, being with the same behavior than the offering.
Thank you so much. Now, I don't know if any of the audience have a question for our panelists. Sorry, we've got a little fly that's very annoying here. But if not, then I'd like to move to maybe explore a little bit more.
Maybe the fly has a question.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yes. let's explore a little bit what we want from this COP, from the COP28. What can we hope for in terms of this kind of gathering, but also from, we've touched on it a little bit with Federico there, on what is needed in terms of regulation, an enabling environment. I'll invite each of you to give us a perspective on that. I want to ask Robert, though, a little bit more, though, before we go to that. Just listening to what you've heard here, and because you have written about this for a long time, what do you think are some of the best ways that we can actually move this action on this challenge forward a bit? I mean, I guess it's a combination of factors, but what would you isolate? What would you pinpoint?
I think one of the interesting things is that I was at FAO this year at the investment days, and they talked about the food system, and the food system being very fragmented. And when I was listening to that, it reminds me of the water systems. There's like 50,000 water utilities in Germany alone, 250,000 water utilities in the US probably, and the whole entire system is fragmented. It's broken up into small tiny pieces, and everyone's replicating and doing the same thing, and one person's replicating, reinventing the wheel, and someone else is trying to reinvent the wheel over and over. It's a really tough thing that somehow we need to come together, the governance, the society, businesses. And it's interesting, when I was listening to a smart city presentation yesterday, they talked about the problem with IT and smart systems was regulations and policies, and I was thinking that's exactly what it is in water.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing across everything, water, food, technology. It's always going to come down to regulations and good policies, and then also obviously the financing. Where's the money?
And the financing.
Yeah.
So while we want the world to change and wait for the world to change, we can get on with the financing, we can get on with the incentivizing. What's out there, you think, in terms of financial incentives that is working or that we could be doing more of?
I think personally, when I look at all the different, financing tools available, we need to be more innovative in what we've got. We've got public-private partnerships, we've got payments for watershed services, we've got green bonds, we've got environmental impact bonds, we've got all this money sitting around in the private sector that can be scaled up and can be really ramped up.
Yeah.
And you see that yesterday in the Emirates, $150 million to scale up water solutions in the Emirates. And that's going to get private sector and everyone coming together.
And that is something that's being talked about here a lot at this COP. It's one of the elements of the statement that's just been released by the multilateral development banks to do more to mobilize the private sector. So maybe I can start with you, Jeanette, and maybe we can kind of try and sum up our panel a little bit together by asking, first of all, in this particular sphere of public-private working together, but also more broadly, what would you like to see from the COP? Is it that area, or is there more?
Yeah, well, I think on the public-private collaboration, that's existed for a long time, but I think Danone and certainly other companies in the space of food and agriculture, we've put out a lot of pilots in the last, I would say, 5-10 years, and now we're really hitting that wall because we are able to put together a kind of small-scale public-private partnerships, but the larger scale that we really need to move to scale and to shift, our entire business, are not really there yet. So I think that's a huge opportunity, and it's really exciting. What's interesting to me too is that that's percolating, and so we're seeing that we're getting interest in collaboration from a lot of different institutions that we weren't talking with necessarily at the same level before. So one specific example, we're launching a global partnership at this COP with UN Development Program, which is going to be global, but the first focus area is going to be Indonesia, and it's going to be on water. And one of the challenges that we flagged to them, and the team that, more operations-driven team that's working on water is always telling me, is that it's really hard to make these projects bankable. So we really need to think collectively, public and private, how do we make them bankable, the projects to protect watersheds? And on the agriculture side, again, public-private is absolutely essential because we have a lot of pilots. We've seen results. but the level of investment that's needed, the level of collaboration that's needed, no company can do that alone if we need to transform at the scale and the speed required, especially on water. So there again, I've been mentioning North Africa, we're starting to have very interesting conversations that probably maybe wouldn't have been possible even 3 years ago, and really looking to how to, I like this idea of taking everyone's talent, putting everyone's role, putting everyone's talent together and saying, okay, how do we look beyond this kind of small supply chain to the region and to the country? And that's really what we need more of.
And in some ways, I mean, having only spent a couple of days at COP myself so far, well, there have only been a couple of days, the investment platforms, the kind of partnerships that we're seeing emerging, out of the need to address the challenge are a good way to start it. Frank, I mean, what do we need more of in terms of incentives, either from this COP or generally from governments, to get these things moving and to meet these investment challenges, obstacles?
Oh, thank you. At the moment, yearly, the EIB finances 2 to 3 billion water investment per year. It's with the World Bank, we are the 2 biggest MDB funding. This is not enough. No. A few days ago, we were discussing with the MDBs, and the Islamic Development Bank voiced our objective to double the number of people that are benefiting from water projects. But the fact that we fund only 2 to 3 billion per year is not because we say, oh, 3 billion, that's done, we can relax. No, it's because we don't have projects coming our way. And the key behind that is, the way we see it, has to do with policymakers at municipal level, regional level, national level. They have a key role to foster more adaptation projects in the water sector. They have a key role to introduce or use better tools like cost recovery, polluter pay principles across all sectors, not just domestic, but also the industry, the agriculture, the energy users. They have a key role to ensure that the way we look at and put regulation in place to manage water is holistic, taking into account different elements, including GHG emissions, scarcity, efficiency, climate risks. There are numerous examples, for instance, where in agriculture, focus was in water efficiency use. That led to more water being used in the end, because it was easier and less costly to use the water, without regard to the quantity of water overall used and the quantity of water given back to the ecosystem to make it functional. So we need really a holistic view, and the policymakers also need to consider the development of what we call non-conventional water resources, such as wastewater reuse, desalination.
Yes.
And this is not easy. It's not always the case, but we have good cases, and I would take a few examples.
Very briefly, because we're...
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I love
we're
the
just
topic.
running out of time.
Yeah.
We love the topic
okay.
too.
One example in Madrid.
Yeah.
Okay, Madrid introduced in 2005 summer tariffs. Okay, and this led to a 15% decline in demand of water, despite a 13% growth in population.
Right.
So amazing. And in another country, in Benin, we're working with the government and the municipality of Cotonou, because they've decided to do something about the recurrent floods that they have with the planning, master plan, etc., and we're helping them funding this operation with other financial institutions. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Frank. We could hear the other ones, but we just don't have time. We've got about 5 more minutes, so I just want to come to you, Federico, Blanca, and Maurizio, briefly. What would you like to see, Federico, if you could just pinpoint one key progress point, either from the COP or locally, that would help in this particular challenge?
Well, and a strong and ambitious message from the COP will be useful for us.
What kind of message would you like to hear?
We must. It is not impossible. It is possible, but we have to act quickly. So what does it mean? What it's the meaning of it in water, talking about water. For example, our water treatment, wastewater treatment plants, we want to change all of them and to change for a new concept. We are talking about eco-factories, zero emissions, recover all the waste, producing biomethane, and doing this traditional waste treatment plants or facilities should change in every part of the country. But we need to act quickly with the public administration. They have to decide and to invest. Of course, cost recovery must be implemented. Second, all these European innovation funds, next generation funds must be implemented quickly because there are a lack of implementation with these funds, with these plans. We need it. So perhaps the new European, I'm sorry, I'm talking about Europe more, and we are in a global scenario. But in Europe, next year we will have a new directive about wastewater treatment. Well, this is a new opportunity which opens an interesting landfill for us. They extend responsibility in water treatment for pharmaceuticals producers and cosmetic will be very useful for the wastewater treatment facilities. So there are a lot of things to do.
There are, and we need to do them quickly and efficiently. Blanca, briefly from COP28, but also bearing in mind that you both, we talk about emergencies, but you also have to deal with the long-term reality, more droughts, more health-related issues as well. What do you want from this COP? What do you want generally?
In my case, I think it's very, very important from this COP that give protagonist to the cities. Because the city have most population and we waste social resource and water resource for this case. So if you think that most of the citizens live in the cities is main protagonist in this scenario. So thank you very much for the COP28 and for organization for give the word at the city.
Put the cities
because
more
the city
it's
necessary to give regulation, national, regional, European framework, but the cities is one of the main scenarios to check if the politician is correctly or no, if the objective is get it or no. If you don't think in the city, it's difficult to change effectively things.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
And Mauricio, what's your perspective on that?
I'm not really enthusiastic with this COP, actually. We will see. I hope to be surprised by the agreements, but maybe it's too late for 1.5 Celsius. And I think two things. One, give more power to some national governments. I think many of the adaptations are in that level. And second, we need to promote in many countries adaptation more than mitigate. And water is a big part of that.
Absolutely, and of course, I know that the World Bank and the EIB are working together on this Climate Action City Gap Fund, which is one of the small ways, but it's an important one. I think we hear you loud and clear about the place for the cities. I think we're coming to the end of the panel. I'd like to thank you all very much. It's been a very rich conversation. We've managed to cover a lot of ground. I hope that we'll be able to build on some of the points that we've been making. I know that Frank has been listening carefully and that we'll meet again to continue the conversation, and in the meantime that things will be done. So thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Frank, Mauricio, Robert, Blanca and Federico. Thank you to all of you who've been listening, both online and in the room, and have a lovely day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.